Let's imagine a life that looks completely normal. No disasters, no extreme poverty, no lottery wins, just average decisions made consistently. What if you never save money, not in your 20s? Not in your 30s, not later. You don't hate saving, you just never prioritize it. It always feels like something that can wait. You start at 20 or 21. First income, first taste of independence. Money comes in, money goes out. You feel broke, but optimistic. Saving sounds like something rich people do. You tell yourself you'll start once you earn more. Once life settles down, once things feel stable. But life never fully settles. At 23, you're learning how expensive adulthood is. Rent, food, transport. Small pleasures that make life tolerable. You're not reckless. You're just spending what you earn, you save nothing. But it doesn't feel dangerous yet, then something small goes wrong. A medical expense, a laptop breaks, a flight you didn't plan for. You don't have savings, so you borrow from the future. Credit card, loan, payment plan, it feels manageable. You tell yourself you'll fix it later. At 25, your income increases slightly. And something important happens without you noticing. Your lifestyle expands to match your income. Your margin stays exactly the same. This is the first invisible trap. You think you're moving forward, but you're just running faster in place. By your late 20s, you've normalized financial tension. That low-level stress that never fully leaves. You check your bank app more often than you'd like. Not because you're curious, but because you're anxious. You avoid thinking too far ahead. Because the future feels expensive. At 30, people start asking serious questions about stability, about plans, about the future. You answer confidently, but privately you feel behind. You still have no savings, no investments, no safety net. One missed paycheck would cause damage. Two would be a disaster, you don't feel poor. But you are fragile, life continues, responsibilities increase. Your fixed expenses grow, commitments stack up. And because you never built savings, every new responsibility adds pressure. Not leverage, in your early 30s, you realize something uncomfortable. You don't make decisions based on what you want. You make them based on what you can survive. You stay in jobs you don't like. You avoid risks that could improve your life. You say no to opportunities that require short-term instability. Not because you lack ambition, but because you lack margin. Margin is what savings buy. By 35, debt has quietly replaced savings in your life. Whenever something goes wrong, debt steps in. Debt becomes your emergency fund, your buffer, your backup plan, and debt is patient. At first, interest is small, payments are manageable. You convince yourself it's under control. But debt compounds too, just in the opposite direction. Now you're approaching 40 and time starts to feel different. You're not old, but you're no longer early. You start thinking about retirement, not seriously, but vaguely. And that's when the numbers start to scare you. You realize saving now would require discipline you never practiced, sacrifice you're not used to, and consistency you never built. Saving late is harder than saving early. Not because of math alone, but because of psychology. At 40, you're tired, you've spent decades working. You want comfort, not austerity. So saving still gets postponed at this stage. Every financial hit feels heavier. Because there's no cushion, no buffer, no shock absorber. You feel pressure not to mess up because you can't afford mistakes anymore. Your world starts shrinking. Fewer options, less flexibility. You can't quit without fear, you can't relocate easily. You can't reinvent yourself. Your life becomes optimized for continuity, not growth at 45. You've officially run out of time to rely on compounding. Now saving means brute force, high contributions, aggressive cuts. But your obligations are at their peak? Family, housing, health, stability, you tell yourself, I'll manage somehow. I don't need much. I'll work longer. These aren't plans. They're coping mechanisms. At 50, retirement stops being an idea and becomes a deadline. You look at your financial reality, and it's unforgiving. No savings means no freedom. No investments means no income without labor. Retirement without savings isn't rest, it's dependency. You're forced to depend on employers, on governments, on systems you don't control. At this point, you don't think about enjoying life. You think about surviving it. by 55. Your body starts sending reminders, energy declines, recovery slows. Work becomes harder, but stopping is impossible. Every health issue becomes terrifying, not because of pain, but because of cost. Medical problems aren't just health problems. They're financial threats. After 60, the consequences stop being abstract. They become daily realities. You wake up earlier not because you want to, but because your body no longer lets you sleep comfortably. Work feels heavier. Not mentally, physically, you move slower. You recover slower, and yet you still depend on income. This is where the cost of never saving becomes brutally clear. Every month feels like a balancing act. Bills, food, healthcare, rent or mortgage. There's no margin for surprises. Any unexpected cost forces trade-offs. Fix this or ignore that. Pay this bill late. Delay something else. Your life becomes a constant negotiation. You tell yourself you'll be fine. You've always figured it out before. But figuring it out takes more energy now, and energy is no longer unlimited. You start noticing how others your age live differently. Not better, differently. They talk about travel, about hobbies, about slowing down. You talk about costs, about prices going up, about how everything feels tighter than it should. The difference isn't intelligence, it isn't effort, it's preparation. They planted seeds decades ago, you didn't. Now imagine a parallel version of your life. Same job, same income, same challenges. The only difference, you saved a little. Consistently. Not perfectly. Not aggressively. Just enough to build margin in that version. Mistakes weren't fatal. Setbacks weren't terrifying. Savings didn't make you rich, they made you calm. Back to the original timeline. Without savings, stress compounds invisibly. Year after year, it wears you down. Chronic financial stress doesn't explode. It erodes. It affects your sleep, your patience, your health. You make worse decisions when you're constantly under pressure. Not because you're careless, but because your brain is exhausted. Financial fragility steals cognitive bandwidth by your mid-60s. Work is no longer optional. It's mandatory. You can't afford to stop even if you want to, even if you should. Retirement isn't a chapter, it's a fantasy. And this is the quiet cruelty of never saving. There is no single moment where everything collapses. No dramatic failure, just a long, slow narrowing of life. You avoid risks when you're young because you feel cautious. You avoid risks when you're old because you feel trapped. Savings delay that trap. Without them, your choices shrink with time. At 70, you depend heavily on external systems. Pensions, government programs, family support. Dependence isn't just financial, it's emotional. You hesitate to ask for help, but you need it. Your dignity feels fragile because independence was never secured. You didn't fail morally, you didn't do anything wrong. You just followed the default path. Spend what you earn, assume things will work out. But the default path doesn't build safety. Now zoom out, look at this life from above. No bad decisions, no luxury addiction. No reckless behavior, just one missing habit, saving. That's how powerful this single behavior is. Saving doesn't change your life immediately. It changes the slope of your life, slightly upward instead of slightly downward. Most people underestimate slopes because they look harmless at first. But decades later, they define everything. This is why saving feels pointless early on. And devastatingly important later when you don't save. You're borrowing peace from your future self. And your future self always pays with interest. Now imagine a small intervention. Not dramatic, not extreme, just 5% of income. Then 10, then consistency. That alone changes the ending. Not into luxury, into stability. Stability is underrated because it's quiet. But stability is what allows joy to exist without fear. When you have savings, you don't panic at every headline. You don't fear every slowdown, you respond instead of react. Savings give you time to think, time to adapt. Time to choose. Without them, time controls you. The real lesson isn't about money, it's about leverage. Savings are leverage over uncertainty. Life will always be uncertain. Costs will rise. Health will fluctuate. Opportunities will appear unexpectedly. Savings turn uncertainty into something manageable. If you're young, this future is optional. If you're older, it's not too late to improve the slope. Even late savings reduce stress, reduce dependence, increase dignity. The goal was never to become rich. The goal was to avoid becoming fragile. Fragility is expensive. Emotionally, physically, mentally. This entire scenario exists not to scare you, but to show you the invisible cost of delay. Every year without saving feels neutral. But it isn't. It's a vote for a narrower future. Saving is not about sacrifice, it's about self-respect across time. You're not saving for emergencies, you're saving for permission. Permission to rest, permission to say no, permission to adapt. And the earlier you buy that permission, the cheaper it is. This is the part nobody tells you. Because it isn't exciting, it doesn't sell dreams. But it determines endings. If you never save money, life doesn't punish you loudly. It quietly removes your options, and by the time you notice, time has already made its decision. This is my capital, and this is what really happens. When you never save money,